I owned 640 acres, 80 head of cattle, and a house with 4 rooms I never used. And somehow, the hardest thing I ever did was let a woman call me by my first name. She called me sir once. Just once. And I told her, probably too sharp for a man trying not to care, "Don't ever call me that again." The expression she gave me, I still think about it. Like I'd slapped her hand off a stove she didn't know was hot. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the morning she showed up at my gate with a flour sack for a suitcase and the kind of pride that makes a person stand straighter when they've got nothing left to stand on. My name is Bowen. I run a cattle ranch in the eastern stretch of Wyoming territory, about 9 miles from a town called Ridley Bend. I say run because that's what I do. I ride, I mend. I pull calves at 3 in the morning when the frost is thick enough to crack your teeth. I've done it so long my own hands can't tell the difference between mine and the men I pay. That was the point. See, I'd been married once before. Her name was Catherine, and she loved the ranch the way a child loves a music box from the outside for the shine of it. When she found out that the shine came with mud and silence and winters that swallowed whole months, she took a coach back to St. Louis and sent the divorce papers with a note that said, "I wish you'd been poor." At least then I'd have known what I was choosing. That one sentence rearranged me. After Catherine left, I stopped eating at the house. I took my meals with the hands, slept in the bunkhouse half the time, wore the same boots and coat as every other man on the place. I didn't introduce myself as the owner, didn't correct anyone who assumed otherwise. If a woman ever came through Ridley Bend and glanced my way, I wanted to know it was because of me, not because of 640 acres. It worked for 3 years. Then Nora Colvin walked through my gate. Dutch, my foreman, the only man on the place who knew the truth, had warned me the week before. "Bowen, if we don't get a cook soon, I'm telling the boys who signs their pay, and then you can explain to every dress in Ridley Bend why you've been playing poor." "You wouldn't," I said. "Try me. I've been eating your biscuits for 2 weeks." He had a point. I'd put out word in town that the ranch needed a cook. The last one, a Swede named Lund, had quit after an argument with Dutch over the proper way to salt pork. Dutch won the argument. The ranch lost its cook. I'd been eating my own biscuits for 2 weeks, and I can tell you honestly, my cattle would have turned them down. Now, I don't know what you're picturing when I say a widow showed up looking for kitchen work. But whatever it is, Nora wasn't that. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't weeping. She stood at my gate with her back straight, and her jaw set, and her eyes scanning the property like she was deciding whether we deserved her, not the other way around. She was also, I noticed immediately and wished I hadn't, the kind of beautiful that a man my age has no business noticing on a Tuesday morning while holding a broken fence rail. "I'm here about the cook position," she said. I leaned the rail against the post. "You got experience?" "I kept a boarding house in Nebraska for 4 years. What happened to it?" "My husband died. The bank took the rest." She said it flat, like weather. No pity in it. No invitation to ask more. I liked that. I gave her the job before she'd finished her second sentence. Dutch raised an eyebrow but said nothing. By the end of her first week, 2 things were clear. First, Nora Colvin could cook like she was settling a personal debt with hunger itself. She turned salt pork and root vegetables into meals the hands actually sat quiet for. Lund had been competent. Nora was an event. Second, she didn't take instruction well. "The flour goes in the storeroom," I told her on the 3rd day, pointing past the kitchen to the back building. She looked at me, then at the storeroom, then back at me. "The storeroom has a leak in the northwest corner. I moved the flour where it won't get wet." "You're welcome." I stood there holding a coffee cup I hadn't asked her to fill but that she'd filled anyway, and I thought, this is going to be a problem. It was a problem. Not because she was difficult, though she was, but because each time she corrected me, each time she looked at me like I was just another hand who didn't know where his own flour should go, something loosened in my chest. She treated me like a man, not like a name on a deed. If you've ever wanted someone to see you, really see you, and then realize that they're only seeing you because you're hiding half of who you are, you know exactly the kind of knot I was tying. Before I go on, where are you listening from? Drop your town in the comments. And if you're staying for the rest, a like lets me know this kind of story matters to you. Dutch noticed before I did. "You're watching her again," he said one afternoon, catching me staring at the kitchen from the corral. "I'm not watching her. I'm looking at the kitchen." "Sure you are." By the second week, the hands had started finding reasons to linger after meals. Nora didn't need to flirt. She'd ask after a man's sore knee, remember how he liked his eggs, pour coffee before he'd reached for the pot. Small things that said, "You're not invisible here." One evening, she caught me stacking her firewood without being asked. She leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "You don't have to do that," she said. "It's just wood. It's my kitchen. I'll manage my own wood." I set the last log down and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She almost smiled. Almost. That almost was worse than a full smile would have been. The first crack came on a Sunday. A man named Harlan Greaves rode out from Ridley Bend. He owned the general store, sat on the town council, and had buried his own wife 2 winters back. He rode up hat in hand, smelling like bay rum, and asked to speak with the ranch owner. I was mending a cinch strap 10 feet away. Dutch, God bless him, didn't blink. "Owner's not around much," Dutch said. "What do you need?" "I came to speak about your new cook." Greaves adjusted his hat. "A young widow working among so many men. Some in town have concerns about appearances." "Appearances," Dutch repeated, his voice flat as a skillet. "I'd be happy to offer her a more appropriate position in town, under proper supervision." Heat crawled up the back of my neck. I glanced down at the cinch strap in my hands and realized I'd twisted the leather hard enough to leave a mark on my palm. I should have kept quiet. A hired hand doesn't stand up to a town councilman. But my mouth moved before my brain caught it. "She's got a position," I said, not looking up from the strap. "She's got a roof and a wage and men who know better than to bother her. If the town's got concerns, the town can write a letter." Greaves stared at me like I'd grown horns. Dutch coughed into his fist to cover what might have been a laugh. "And who?" Greaves said slowly. "Are you?" "Just a hand." He left. But he left watching me the way a man watches a dog that bit him when it shouldn't have known how. That night, Nora brought it up herself. She'd heard hoofbeats, seen the bay rum hat from the kitchen window. "Was that Harlan Greaves? You know him?" "He came by the day I arrived in Ridley Bend. Offered me a room above his store." She paused. "He made it sound like charity." It didn't feel like charity. The way she said it, quiet, careful, like she was testing whether I'd understand, I felt something shift between us. Not romance. Not yet. A deeper thing. Trust deciding whether to take root. "You don't have to worry about Greaves," I said. I wasn't worried. She looked at me across the porch railing, the last light of the day turning her hair copper at the edges. "I was warning you. Men like that don't forget when someone smaller makes them feel small." She went back inside. I sat there thinking she was the least small person I'd ever met. The days got warmer, and so did the trouble. Greaves didn't come back, but I heard through a hand who'd gone to town for supplies that he'd been talking. Saying the ranch was taking advantage of a grieving woman. Saying someone ought to look into it. The kind of talk that doesn't need to be true to do damage. Meanwhile, I was losing a war with myself. Nora and I had fallen into a rhythm, morning coffee before the hands woke up, evenings on the porch when the work was done, conversations that started about the ranch and ended somewhere closer to the bone. She told me about her husband, Thomas. How he'd been a good man but a poor planner. How she'd loved him the way you love someone who needs you more than they'll admit. "And you?" she asked one night. You ever been married? I almost told her everything right then. The words were right there, stacked up like cordwood behind my teeth. But I studied her face, open, unguarded, watching me like I was just Bowen, just a man on a porch, and I swallowed them back down. Once, I said. It didn't hold. Her fault or yours? Both. Mostly mine. She nodded, like that was enough. And God help me, I let it be. The morning it happened, I was in the barn. A feed supplier from Cheyenne had ridden in with a late delivery, and he didn't know the arrangement. He handed me the invoice and said, loud enough for anyone within 30 yards to hear, "There you go, Mr. Bowen." Sign at the bottom for the full order. I signed fast, too fast, and pushed the paper back without looking up. But when I turned around, Nora was standing in the barn doorway. She had an egg basket on her hip and an expression I couldn't read. She didn't say anything. Not right away. She carried the eggs to the kitchen. She cooked breakfast. She poured coffee and laughed at a joke one of the hands told about a mule. Normal day. I almost convinced myself she hadn't heard. Then, while I was carrying my plate to the basin, she stepped in front of me. Close enough that I could smell flour and soap and a warmth underneath both that I had no right cataloguing. "Thank you for breakfast," I said. "Like always." "You're welcome." A pause. Then, "Sir." One word. Quiet as a blade. She said it looking straight at me, and her eyes were asking a question her mouth wasn't. I set the plate down harder than I meant to. "Don't ever call me that again." The kitchen went silent. Two hands at the table stopped chewing. Dutch closed his eyes like a man watching a wagon tip over a cliff in slow motion. Nora didn't flinch. She held my gaze for 3 full seconds. I counted, then turned back to the stove. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. Not at lunch, not at supper, not on the porch where we'd been sitting together each night for 3 weeks. Her chair was empty, and the silence it left was louder than any argument. Dutch found me by the water trough that evening, staring at nothing. "You know," he said, rolling a cigarette with the patience of a man who'd seen me make every kind of mistake. "For a smart man, you've got a real talent for doing the dumb thing at the worst possible time." She heard the supplier. I know she heard the supplier. Everybody south of the Bighorns heard the supplier. He lit the cigarette and squinted at me through the smoke. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know." "Well, you better figure it out. Because that woman isn't the kind who waits around for a man to sort himself out. She's the kind who packs a flour sack and walks." He was right. I'd known it the moment I saw her at the gate. 3 days passed. 3 days of Nora serving my meals without meeting my eyes, answering my questions with the fewest words the English language would allow, and treating me with the exact same courtesy she gave any other hand on the place. Which was the cruelest part, she didn't punish me by being cold. She punished me by being professional. She put me back in the category of all the other men she cooked for, and the distance felt like a canyon. On the 4th day, Greaves came back. This time he brought a wagon. I was out on the south fence when I heard it. By the time I rode in, he was standing in front of the kitchen, hat in hand again, smiling the kind of smile that has paperwork behind it. "Mrs. Colvin," he was saying, "I've arranged a position at the hotel in town. Room included. A widow of your quality shouldn't be living out here with men," she barely. "I told you I'm fine here," Nora said. She was standing in the doorway, but her voice had a crack in it that hadn't been there a week ago. "With respect, ma'am, you don't even know who you're working for. I've asked around. No one in town has ever met the owner of this ranch. Doesn't that strike you as peculiar?" Nora's eyes moved to me. Just for a second. But in that second, I saw it not anger, not betrayal, but something worse. Doubt. She was starting to wonder if Greaves was right. If the whole place was wrong. If she'd walked into a place she didn't understand and couldn't trust. I got off my horse. "Greaves," I said. The owner's standing right in front of you. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I've ever heard on that ranch. Dutch leaned against the fence post with his arms crossed, like a man who'd been waiting for this particular show for 3 years. Greaves looked at me, then at Dutch, then back at me. His face went through about 4 different expressions before it settled on one I recognized. The face of a man who just realized he'd been talking down to someone who could buy his store twice over. "Mr. Bowen," he said, and I heard the shift in his voice, that instant recalibration people make when they find out you have more than they thought. I wasn't aware. "No, you weren't." I stepped closer, not threatening. Just close enough that he'd have to look up slightly. "Nora Colvin has a position here. She has a wage, a roof, and the respect of every man on this property. If the town has concerns about appearances, the town can come talk to me. The actual me. Now get off my land." He left faster than the first time. I stood there watching his wagon shrink down the road and feeling like I'd swallowed a hot stone, knowing what was coming next. I turned around. Nora was still in the doorway. Her arms were crossed and her jaw was set, and she stood exactly the way she had the morning she'd arrived, except now her eyes were wet, and the pride holding her upright seemed to be costing her everything she had. "Nora, don't." She held up one hand. "How long?" "From the start. Every morning, every conversation on the porch, every time I told you something about my life, you were lying to me. I wasn't lying about, you let me believe you were a hired hand. You sat across from me and let me talk about my dead husband and my failures and my..." Her voice broke. She pressed her lips together and looked away, toward the mountains, like she was calculating how far she could get before dark. "I wanted you to see me," I said. It came out quieter than I intended. Not the ranch, not the deed, just me. "And you decided that for both of us." She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist, fast, like she was angry at the tears for existing. "You decided what I could handle, what I deserve to know. That's not trust, Bowen. That's control." That word hit harder than anything Greaves could have said. She was right. I dressed it up as honesty, as wanting to be seen for myself, but underneath all of it was the same fear Catherine had left me with, the terror that nobody would stay for just Bowen. And instead of risking that, I'd taken the choice away from Nora entirely. "I'll pack tonight," she said. "Don't go. Give me one reason that isn't about what you need." I stood there in the yard, the sun on my back and the wind pulling at my hat, and I tried to think of a reason that wasn't selfish. One that wasn't "please stay because the ranch is quieter without you," or "please stay because your coffee is the only thing that gets me out of the bunkhouse," or "please stay because I haven't felt this much like a person in 3 years." "Because you built something here," I said finally. "The kitchen is yours. The routine is yours. The hands respect you, not because of me, but because of what you've done. Greaves can't offer you that." And I stopped. Took a breath. "I know I don't have the right to ask you anything, but I'm asking anyway. Stay. Not for me, for what you've already made of this place." She didn't answer. She went inside and closed the door, and I heard the latch drop on the other side. I sat on the porch that night, in my chair next to her empty one, and I thought about Catherine's note. "I wish you'd been poor. At least then I'd have known what I was choosing." And for the first time, I understood what she'd really meant. It wasn't about money. It was about the fact that I'd never let her see the full picture. I'd hidden behind the ranch the same way I was now hiding behind its absence. Different mask, same fear. The next morning I came to the kitchen expecting cold stove and silence. Instead, the lamp was lit. Coffee was on, and Nora was standing at the counter, kneading dough with the kind of force that said she still had things to work out, but had decided to work them out here rather than somewhere else. She didn't look at me when I walked in. "Sit down," she said. I sat. "You're going to tell me everything. The ranch, Catherine, why you did what you did. All of it. And you're going to do it without deciding what I can handle." "Yes, ma'am." And stop calling me ma'am. My name is Nora. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup she'd set in front of me, placed, not slid, which I took as a sign, and I started talking. I told her about Catherine, about the divorce papers, about the 3 years I'd spent pretending to be less than I was afraid that who I actually was would never be enough. I told her things I hadn't told Dutch, things I hadn't told myself until I heard them come out of my mouth. She listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't soften, didn't offer comfort. She just listened, the way you listen when someone is finally telling you the truth and you want to make sure they finish. When I was done, she set a plate in front of me. Eggs, biscuits, a strip of bacon. Eat, she said. Is that, are we? We're not anything yet. She sat down across from me with her own plate, and for the first time in 4 days, she looked me in the eye. But I didn't walk 40 miles across Nebraska with a flour sack to run away from a man who's scared of the same things I'm scared of. She picked up her fork. I picked up mine. We ate breakfast. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a table with 2 people sitting at it who'd both decided, separately and for their own reasons, to stay. Outside, Dutch walked past the kitchen window. He glanced in, saw us sitting across from each other, and kept walking. But I caught the smallest nod, the kind a man gives when what he'd been hoping for finally comes through. The ranch didn't change overnight. Neither did we. Nora kept cooking. I kept mending fences and pulling calves and doing all a rancher does, except now I did it as myself. She called me Bowen. Never sir, never Mr. Bowen, just Bowen. And each time she said it, it sounded like a choice she was making fresh. One afternoon, about a week after the truth came out, she found me repairing the kitchen door hinge. She watched for a minute, then said, "You know, most ranch owners would pay someone to do that. Most ranch owners didn't spend 3 years pretending to be that someone." She almost laughed. Not quite, but closer than before. Some evenings, she'd sit on the porch again. Not every evening, just some. And on those evenings, we'd talk the way 2 people talk when they've agreed that the truth is more important than comfort. Even when the truth is inconvenient, even when it's ugly, even when it would be easier to wrap it in a gentler shape. "Tell me something true," she said one evening, when the sky was turning that shade of copper she wore in her hair. "I'm afraid you'll leave." "Good," she said. Now we're getting somewhere. It took time. It took patience I didn't know I had, and grace I definitely didn't deserve. But somewhere between the first frost and the first thaw, the distance between our chairs got a little smaller. One afternoon, she caught me smiling at nothing. "What?" she said. "Nothing. Just, you're still here. Where else would I be, Bowen?" And the way she said my name, like it was the simplest thing in the world, like it had never needed a title in front of it, that was the moment I knew. One night, I won't say which, since some moments belong only to the people who lived them, she reached across the space between us and put her hand over mine. Didn't say a word, didn't need to. After a long while, she whispered, "No more hiding." "No more hiding," I said. "If you've ever held back the truth from someone you cared about, not to hurt them, but because you were afraid the truth would change the way they looked at you, I think you understand me better than I understood myself for most of my life. Tell me about it in the comments. Every word you leave helps this channel grow and keeps these stories coming. I'm grateful you stayed till the end. I own 640 acres, 80 head of cattle, and a house with 4 rooms I used to never use. These days, every room has her touch in it. A curtain she sewed. A jar of wildflowers on a windowsill. A smell of bread that greets me before I reach the door. She didn't stay for the ranch. She stayed for the man who almost lost her by pretending he didn't have one. And I'd say that's worth more than any deed.